Richard Skipper celebrates. Every show is a celebration. Each show, Richard delivers the artists you love, showcasing what makes them unique. Never gossipy. The antidote to a sometimes hectic world. Now, here's your host, Richard Skipper.
Happy Sunday, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Richard Skipper Celebrates. This is the show in which I celebrate artists and their body of worth. What makes a great artist? How do they get from point A to point B and beyond? Now, the theater is made up of all types of artists. There are many that we know that we see on the stage, but there are many that work behind the scenes. And I am so excited about today's guest, Aldo Scrofani, as I have been looking over his life and career. He has packed into his short life on this planet many careers that have led him to this show today and where we are. And I am so thrilled that you're here, first of all. I want to remind everyone, unfortunately, we are still in the midst of a pandemic. Today marks 414 days since our theaters shut down. And before we delve into your past and the path that led you to where you are now, I want to ask, how are you doing really in the midst of this crazy world we find ourselves in?
That's a great question. I ask myself daily how I'm doing, and everyone around me how I'm doing. I think we're doing well, given the circumstances. You know, one of the things that I'm most proud of at the Apollo is the ability to pivot based on the challenges that we have. I mean, that organization, you know, the history is extraordinary. And I arrived 3 years ago trying to move and help that history move forward. And here we are shut down in the middle of March. I think it was March 12th of last year. And it's really hard to be, we're a not-for-profit, so being shut down is really not a challenge. You know, we're an ongoing business. So I think we just kind of dug in and said, we're going to find a way to file with the governor's office some kind of a reopening plan that would have allowed us to do live events from the Apollo without an audience. And we got approval so we have managed to do well over 40 digital events, and we've kept very busy. We're onboarding 2 new theaters at the Victoria. So we haven't had a lot of time to deal with, can we just sit at home and not work? And our staff and our team has really stepped up to the plate. Now, how am I doing? I'm doing all of this from my home every day. I managed to get in my car and go into the Apollo like every 3 or 4 weeks just to check how things are going. This has been a challenge. You know, I think we certainly aren't able to present our normal programming at the Apollo on a live basis, and neither is anyone else in New York City. You know, the theater has been shut down. How am I doing? I have my vaccination, so I'm feeling
Same here.
empowered. Yep. My wife has a vaccination. I'm encouraging our entire staff to get vaccinated. I think despite the challenge, some new things have come out of this opportunity, and I think we're going to seize on those opportunities. You know, these new things, digital programming. You know, we trademarked the name Apollo Digital Stage because I think we'll never go back to just live performances. You know, we will be having live, and of course, I think digital programming will become a big part of our future.
Well, as I look back over the past year and almost a year and a half, when I think about everything that we're going through and what we've gone through, I think of this as a pause. It's a pause for us to really take into account where we are, where we've been, and where we want to go. Right. And I think it's forced all of us to stop. You probably have answered most of my next question, but I want to ask you, what are some of the biggest impacts that the year has had on you, beyond the obvious, that you will be carrying forward as you reopen your doors?
Well, I think, you know, I've spent my entire life in the live entertainment business, theater. That's been my effectively my career.
Mhm.
And it's always been done in real time, face to face. You know, when I first started in the theater, there was no email, there was no telephone, right? And we did business, and that's how we got used to doing business.
Well, let me ask you, excuse me for interrupting, but social media and the way that things are done now, is it a blessing or a curse for you, or a little bit of both?
I see it as a huge blessing. I mean, I see it as an opportunity to expand beyond, you know, theater has four walls and a certain limited number of seats. And we attract a tremendous number of people that need to come somewhere to see it. At the same time, our message gets out one person at a time, but our audience is quite global, right? I think it's 68 or 69% of the audience that arrives in New York comes from outside of the New York area. And I think social media, in my opinion, is a fantastic tool to be able to make a message, your message, brand your message, and get it out beyond the four walls of so I see it as a and to be honest, we would not have survived this pandemic to the level that we did without social media, without the ability to constantly keep our messaging going out.
Well, Aldo, as I said at the beginning of the show, theater is made up of all types of people. And there are people like myself who, from the moment that I knew what theater was, I pursued it. Then there are people who, by happenstance, happen to end up in it. And I know you, for example, you as a child, I don't think were aspiring for a career in show business. You were born, was it in Venice, Italy that you were born?
My brothers were born in Venice. This was always a little thing that we did internally. My brothers were born in Venice because my father was a port manager of Venice.
Right.
And then he was transferred to Sicily in a little town called Augusta to help build a port there. And so I was born in Sicily. So we always had this little family struggle when my brothers would say, "You're not Italian, you're Sicilian." And I'd say, "Well, you're not Italian, you're German." I said, "You might as well be German living there." You know, anyway, clearly we're all Italian. We migrated.
Like the UN at your dinner table.
Yeah. we certainly had an eclectic amount of food in our house.
But when you were 8 years old, your family moved to New Jersey.
To New Jersey, yeah.
And but even then, I mean, do you remember the first show that you went to see, either as a child or as a teenager?
Yes, it was a show. I think I was in third grade. Oh goodness, I can't remember. It was a British musical. This is before I saw Oliver for the first time in I think it was 1962 or 64. Yes. But I was just blown away. But I apologize. I can't remember this musical. I can remember the actor having this amazing smile and going on. I think I was in fourth grade, and we made an annual trip of going in, getting on the bus, and going in to see a Broadway musical. To me, it was great. I loved it. I was an athlete. I for a period of time, I wanted to be an electrical engineer because my dad told me, electricity is the future, go be an electrical. And he wasn't wrong. And then when I decided not to do that, he kept saying to me, finance. Meanwhile, I was the president of my chorus. I sang, I performed in school plays, but I was the captain of my football team. I was really trying to find a way, how do I become an American? Didn't think theater was ever going to be a part of my life or entertainment. I just thought I'm going to go out and make a career in the corporate world, and that's what I would do. And
now you got a bachelor's of science degree.
Right.
5 years it took to get that, or
well, I got a bachelor's. I have a bachelor of science, and then I went on and got an MBA in National Honor Society in economics and finance. And my first 4 years out of college, I went to work for a big accounting and consulting firm and got into the accounting auditing part, which I discovered I really didn't like. Got into more of the consulting part of the business. And one of the clients I was working on were the Schubert Organization. Mm-hmm. And a guy named Bob Wankel, who's now the...
Yes.
And I worked at the same firm, and Bob left my firm, went to the Schuberts as their controller at a time, way back when. And one time at a dinner with Bernie Jacobs and Bob, I kept saying, I really hate consulting because all you do is tell people what they should be doing, and you repeat the things that you told them the year before. I just want to get my hands dirty. Give me something I can really work on. Mm-hmm. The next day, I got a phone call from Bernie, and he said that, there's this little company. There's a guy named James Binger who this little company, it's right up your alley. You should call him. So I get back in those days, Richard, we wore 3-piece suits.
Yes.
So I'm in a 3-piece suit. I get on an airplane and I'm flying to Minneapolis, wondering, why am I interviewing in Minneapolis for a job in New York? And I get the address. I'm in a taxi and I end up at the Honeywell headquarters. And I am meeting with James Binger, who at the time was the chairman of Honeywell. Mm-hmm. And my interview went something like, I'm so glad you flew out here. I'm really grateful that you take the time. He said, I inherited this company from my father-in-law, which was Bill McKnight, who was one of the M's in the 3M company. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Jim had married Virginia Binger, who was Mr. McKnight's daughter. And when Bill McKnight died, he inherited this company. And he said, I've been thinking of selling it. And I said, well, why am I here? And he said, well, tell me why I shouldn't sell it. And that was the extent of my interview. 3 or 4 weeks later, I walked into Jujamcyn Theatres. Mm-hmm. And boy, it was an eye opener. I would say my first 6 months, I was semi-suicidal, thinking, oh my God, what did I do? I threw away a career to work in this theater business, which is filled with crazy people. Well, can you
elaborate on that for a moment? What was it about that time that made you feel suicidal?
Well, I was figuratively suicidal.
I know figuratively.
Not suicidal type, right? But clearly, this was, without giving away my age, this was 1977, and the theater had not gone through a very good period of time at that time. It was really in bad shape.
And, let me put in perspective, right. So was New York. I mean, New York was on the verge of bankruptcy. It was
terrible. And, my first year there, my job, they had hired a new president, a guy I was very fond of, Dick Wolf, and he was replacing a gentleman who had basically founded Jujamcyn Theatres over a long period. So my first year of work was to usher out the former president of the company and bring in the new president. And in the meantime, and I just got to learn, first person I met, his name was Sam Schwartz, and his best friend was David Merrick. And David Merrick rented an office from me at the top of the St. James Theater. And he introduced me to David Merrick and his entourage of people. And that was the beginning of my life in the theater, was learning this extraordinary story of how Sam Schwartz convinced Bill McKnight to give him money to buy the St. James and the Colonial Theater when the Schubert organization was going through a reorganization. They had to get rid of so many theaters. And in those days, those were 2 balcony, second balcony house was not the most optimal. It's not the optimal way. If you can have 1,500 seats without a second balcony, musicals would be running a longer period of time. And when I walked in, it was this business mind meeting art and trying to make sense of art and business. And boy, it took me a while to give into the art. I don't know if that makes sense.
It makes absolute sense. And of course, David Merrick was the type of producer at that time. Wow. I'm assuming at that time still that Broadway producers, it was one name above the title. That
only one.
Yeah. And where and how did things start to change to become an entire village of producers coming on board?
I think when raising, we had few things going on in the city at that time that have really gone. They're gone forever. And to some degree, I'm sort of glad. And to some degree, I'm disappointed. We had what we used to refer to as a carriage trade. A carriage trade was the New York crowd when a show opened and those New York Times reviews came out, you could count on this carriage trade building your business for you. It was the best social media that ever existed without electricity.
Word of mouth, word of mouth.
Word of mouth just carried on. And while they kept the show going, word of mouth would spread to other locations. And okay, that trade has sort of, disappeared. I think the challenge of theater was always big to me. It always looked spectacular, but it didn't cost $18 to $20 million to do a musical. My first play, which was given to me to Jujamcyn by Sam Schwartz, was a play called Dracula with Frank Langella.
No,
And
absolutely.
he said, I want to introduce you to two people, Liz McCann and Nell Nugent. They were my partners. And he said, I'm going to introduce them to you because Jujamcyn was 1/3 partner in this Dracula. And the Martin Beck Theater was on the other side of 8th Avenue, if you recall.
Oh, yes.
And I knew all those people by name that I had to walk
And the
past.
Hirschfeld Theater, for those who don't know.
Right.
Yes.
And it's now the Hirschfeld Theater. And that theater was not lit for years, really run down. We cleaned it up. That entire play cost us $350,000.
Wow.
And it went on to become, I don't know if you remember the first I Love New York commercial.
Oh, of course. Absolutely.
Frank Langella ends that commercial by saying, I love New York, especially in the evening. The box office just went through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
If we were producing that play today, it would be $8-9 million. And musicals, when I produced Scoundrels, Marty Bell and I were the general partners, and we had amazing people joining us above the title, and we had to raise $11 million, and it was a huge musical. Jack O'Brien, Jerry Mitchell, Greg Barnes. I mean, David Rockwell designed the scenery. It was more scenery than I'd ever seen in my life. How are we ever going to raise $11 million? And it took us 14 people above the title.
Mm-hmm.
And Marty and I decided to make a joke saying it took so many people. We added the Prussian army as one of the people above the title, just to make a statement that look what it takes. Now it's 30, 40, 50 people. And I think it's because part of the industry has become that you can be a producer with taste and quality, and God bless them, because without them, many shows would not be getting produced, are able to raise funds from groups of people that one person doesn't have the ability to reach. And that has been a huge change.
Mm-hmm.
With a team of 50 people all telling you what their opinions are, plus your own opinion, plus the creative team's opinion, plus that director. I've worked with all of them, Hal Prince and every one of them. Everybody has a vision. The director has a vision, a producer has a vision, right? And that's where the first hopeful marriage happens. In the end, it is the producer's responsibility to get this ship out of port and sailing into success. But it's the director's responsibility to stage it. And
well, it takes collaboration, number one.
Right.
Carol Channing used to refer to the director as the benevolent despot, that person who's going to pull us into port and get us there.
And boy, sometimes, that's what it feels like. Yep.
But I mean, again, going back to this period, you're flying by the seat of your pants, essentially. You're learning on the job, pretty much. Right. What kept you going? What kept you, and when did that moment for you, where you said, this is exactly where I belong?
Every time I met one of these astonishing, I call them crazy in the most loving, affectionate way. I was in awe of these people, the talent and things that they would get me thinking about that I didn't know I had a part of the brain that knew how to think about these things. And being around Cy Coleman, I could go on for days naming the types of composers and people that I've worked with. And every time I had a meeting with them, I would walk out saying, wow. It was like constant revelation for me. I would say it was about 5 or 6 years into it, and we started to make money. And we convinced Jim Binger that 2 theaters in New York wasn't enough. I was commuting back and forth to Boston. And I said, we want to buy more theaters in New York. And that was the point in which he said, okay, how are you going to do this? And we did. I had to sell the Colonial in Boston as one, and we bought the Virginia Theater, which then was called the Virginia Theater, and now the August Wilson Theater. Then we bought the O'Neill. Then we bought the Ritz Theater. And that to me was just that part in my life where these 2 theaters in New York, we were now 5 theaters strong. We started to more heavily produce. Shows had this little pecking order of who to go see. They first went to the Schuberts, then they would go to the Nederlanders, and then they would come to Jujamcyn. And we decided, how best can we circumvent this a little bit? Maybe we can become more involved in the early stages of a musical. And that to me is when I wasn't producing, I was running theater company. And I started to learn about producing, and I learned it from some of these amazing directors, really. Listening to these directors, Hal Prince, what he doesn't know about producing, I wish I could learn, right? Yes. And when you work with a guy like Hal Prince, you learn all kinds of things. And all of this was really coalescing at, I don't know, really a perfect age for me. I was in my late 30s, and things were really just starting to cook. And then, I hit a period of time where I started feeling like New York was a really small town.
Oh, it sure is.
It felt like a really small town to me.
And when did everything start to shift for you as far as the city itself was concerned?
I'm going to say we got into the late 80s. Business was really good, but it was getting extremely complicated from my point of view. A lot of people from out of town, I'm feeling anyway, this is my recollection, many more new faces were coming to New York wanting to be in the theater and bringing with them, their opinions, their tastes, of course, and whatever desires that they had. And New York stopped feeling like, it felt like a small town, but it felt like there were many more people with many more diverse ideas. And there was a time I was becoming very interested in touring and promoting, out of town. There was a period of time we got involved with a theater in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we supported some very good people, I won't mention their names, who were promoters there. And I found myself having to spend a lot of time in Charlotte. I was already promoting in Boston, so I kind of knew what that was like. In Charlotte, North Carolina, trying to fix this business of promoting, and discovered, there's like 600 cities in this country, Richard. With
exactly. I have a question for you. I grew up in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina.
Oh.
So I spent a lot of time as a kid in Charlotte. And when as a kid going to Charlotte, there was nothing there.
Right.
How did Charlotte become a hub?
It was, I think, the banking industry. I don't really know what it was, but major industries were moving down there. I mean, it's a pretty well-educated population there, a lot of infrastructure support. The theater that we were promoting in, which is almost embarrassing, was the Ovens Auditorium. It had 5,000 seats. And I booked Driving Miss Daisy, 2-character play, in a 5,000-seat theater. And it was completely sold out. And I thought, wow, this is right. From an economics point of view, you say, wow, this is really something. But what it said is that in that town, there were people that were willing to go out of their homes to go to a 5,000-seat theater to see a play, 2 characters. And
no special effects, no special scenery, just 2 people.
Very little, just 2 people, and amazing, amazing words to speak and emotions to share, right? And that it filled, my point, it filled the 5,000-seat auditorium, and nobody felt like they were further away than 10 or 15 feet from the stage because it was just superbly done, Those are the things that really struck me as being like, well, okay, now I know why I'm still here. And, I think it was 1990, I left Jujamcyn and went to Columbia Artists. to work in the theater department at Columbia. And the reason I went there was because Columbia was this company that I would say they used to do well over 100 events, and everything from the New York Philharmonic on tour to Alvin Ailey Ballet to theatrical show. We were touring Cats at the time. And I joined that company, and it was like within 6 months, I got named to the board of directors. And then 6 months later, I was made the COO of the company. And I was running the company and producing. I was no longer running venues. I was producing shows to go out on tour. And in my almost 20 years there, I mean, I don't feel that old.
You're not?
No, I am.
You're not.
I don't feel that old.
No.
Astonishing. I would have to say I've been to probably 30 countries around the world with shows. Everything. I produced Stomp in 1994, which opened in New York, and talk about no social media, trying to get a show that sits in a 400-seat, it's less than 400-seat theater at the Orpheum on 2nd Avenue in the Lower East Side.
Amazing phenomenon.
26 years. And how the word spread, this is no social media. I teach a course at NYU, and I'm trying to tell my students,
talk about, yes.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to tell them, I said, in the days when there were no fax machines, I just bought the first fax machine. We used to put copy in, mimeograph, right? Mimeograph, and used to put a carbon between papers so somebody could type 2 copies of a letter. Try to promote internationally, but that's your world. But we managed to convince, I think it was ABC's Channel 7, to come in and record because it's hard to tell people, what is Stomp? And they recorded it, and we said, well, we'll come into your television studio, and if you have a kitchen, we will teach all your team how to do Stomp rhythms. And they did that, and it was like overwhelming.
Was that an easy sell to get them to do that?
No. Our press department, Bon O'Brien Brown, we've been with them for, they're just fabulous. And Jackie Green has been our press agent forever. Managed to get them to come in. CNN happened to be looking at that news and saw it and invited us, Stomp, to do a segment on CNN. We convinced CNN to follow us around town from the theater, marching through the streets. And it blew the doors off the place. And Quincy Jones was watching CNN. This is social media.
Mm-hmm.
And calls Luke and Steve, who are the brilliant creators of the show, and convinced them to do the opening of the Oscars. And we were on the Oscars, and the opening sequence were all these slamming doors where, like, the guy's in trouble, the woman slams the door in his face, and the guys are on the stage doing slamming doors. And the front page of the New York Times the next day was a picture of the Oscars and Stomp. And that was that.
And the rest is history.
The rest is history.
So
and that's the world I lived in.
Jerry Orbach once told a great story when they were doing 42nd Street on Broadway. After the show each night, a lot of the actors would have a poker game that they would conduct on the stage, something you couldn't do now. Do you know the story?
No, I don't.
And something you can't do now. But they said, come and join us in the game. And he looked out over an empty theater and he said, that's my poker game.
Yeah.
That's what I do. So being in this business, you never know what's going to hit, what's not going to hit. You've talked about 2, Driving Miss Daisy and Stomp.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the other productions that you've been involved in that surprised you the most, either in their success or their not so big success?
Yeah, I think the one, probably the biggest surprising story, because it was also an eye-opener for me. This was New York during the time of AIDS. We lost an astonishing number of just amazing people. And this play called M. Butterfly. This play called M. Butterfly, John Dexter was directing. And the producer and we decided to participate in it. And what's the story about? It's a story about this French diplomat who's in China, falls in love with a Chinese opera star. For 25 years, they carry on this relationship. And at the end of 25 years, he discovers that it's a man.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Stuart Ostrow was the lead producer and his partner was David Geffen and Jujamcyn, we invested in the show and we were going to be producing the show. And the show opened in Washington, D.C. And David Richards, who was the critic at the time, absolutely panned the show. And I think David Geffen and Stuart decided, David didn't want to continue with the show. And Stuart said, I'm going to New York with the show. This is what flying by the seat of your pants, but it's more than that. It's courage. What Stuart could see in the show, most of us had trouble seeing, and the idea really that was missing was that this man knew that it was a man, but he had his own issues, right? And that's storytelling. And when the play came to New York, Stuart came to me and said, David has bowed out. I need more money. And so I made a deal with him. I wasn't the president of the company then, but I was still the COO. And I had to lend him the money. I said, I've already had a ton of money in the show, meaning our company did, but we did this loan. Mm-hmm. And I said, Stuart, I'm only doing this because you have such a conviction in this thing. Anyway, the play opens in New York, and I was not optimistic. I loved the play, and it opened up to be an extraordinary hit. I mean, this play took the town by storm, and it woke everyone up. Everyone. And you know what? When they saw, and B.D. Wong, John Lithgow, the stylized stage, right? I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
That scene when he's coming down in his Asian dress, and John Lithgow is standing there, and he's wondering. So I have goosebumps because it still moves me to think how close.
Obviously, it was a great story. But do you think it was the timing of when it opened?
I think it shook. You know what? Yes, I think timing really had a lot to do with it, because it couldn't have come at a better time than to sort of say, "Come on, folks. I mean, what is this about? What do you think? What, you're just going to turn your back on all of this? How long are we going to let people be dying of AIDS before realizing these are all humans? We all have stories." Mm-hmm. And that just really opened it up. And here's the more interesting part. I was involved in New York when we did the show. I then left Jujamcyn. I would say 5 years later, I'm at Columbia. Stuart Ostrow calls me and he says, "Don't you think America should see the show?" I said, "Stuart, America isn't where New York is, but I don't know. Maybe we can find Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, Boston, Washington." So our booking team started booking this tour. And because the show won the Tony, we booked a pretty substantial tour, and I had my fingers crossed. And here's the second surprise. It sold out everywhere in America. Right. And I thought, I think this is a pretty good business. Not because we didn't always make money. I went through a lot of years where we really struggled. Like, are we still going to be here? But these war stories are the ones that really keep you going, between hits, because there are a lot of things that you do that are not hits.
Well, you teach a course in the business of Broadway,
right?
And at NYU. And when you started this course, was this something that was already in place, or was this in your brain to create something like this?
There was no such thing as that course. I was guest lecturing at the grad school on a pretty constant basis, and one of the professors had, you should consider teaching here a course. And I'm very interested. I actually taught the same course at Muhlenberg College for a couple of years. And I said, "Okay, well, what do you want me to teach?" He said, "Well, I think you should teach about the business of Broadway." So I sat down, and it's probably the closest I ever came to writing a script, because it's 14 weeks of 2 hours each week. And I took everybody on a journey, and my students are all smart, NYU kids. What did they know about theater? Very little, other than I love theater, or they're a music major, or they're a marketing or a finance major, wouldn't know how to buy a ticket other than his mother took him to see a show. So I designed a course. I did a 50, 60-page syllabus, and then I created a class, and this is my 13th or 14th year. And it's turned out to be a very popular class. I have 50 students every semester in one class. And I teach the first 9 classes. They learn everything from what is risk, intellectual property, collaboration, product development, process, all these things, marketing, so forth. And then I pick 10 teams of 5 people. I put them together so they can't be with friends. I said, welcome to life in the theater. You don't always get to work with people you love or like, just respect.
That's true. Yes.
And they produce a show, not physically, but each one has a part. Somebody does production. Somebody does what I call market distribution or strategy. Somebody does the marketing. Somebody does the budget, and somebody does the funding. And everything you learned in a semester, you now have to apply. And Richard, these kids, I don't think we were as smart as they are. Their creativity.
I want to take this course.
I think you know what? It's recorded. I mean, because I teach this semester has all been virtual. So if you want a challenge, try teaching 50 students you've never met. I had to learn. I'm a little tech challenged. But I had to learn, thanks to my wife and my 14-year-old daughter, I had to learn.
God for the 14-year-olds.
Oh, you have no idea. And she criticizes me all the time. No, Dad, no. But I've had to do Google Documents, Google Drive, and shared. I didn't even know. What do you mean shared document? Yeah, well, you send the document, they could look at it, they could write on. I don't want anybody writing up, no. And we're in the final throes of our semester. I have tomorrow 3 more teams do their presentations, and I create a rubric in which all 50 people in the class are investors. What I refer to as the theater mafia. All those people that come to the workshops, right? That want to see the show. And I said, your idea is to get funded, right? There are 10 teams presenting to these 50 skadillionaires trying to get something done. Convince them that your show is the one that they should invest in. And you know something, this is 13 years. Every one of them says at the end, when it's all over, I had no idea what you have to do to get a show on.
I think there are many people in the theater who don't realize what it takes.
Yeah.
No, to be honest with you. How has the course evolved over the years?
It's a constant adjustment to, you remember the word front money and seed money?
Yes.
Okay. Back in the old days, you could raise money, seed money, right? You had to acquire the rights, maybe hire a lawyer, a general manager, and you needed about $300,000 or $400,000. But New York state law says you can only go to 4 people. Okay. Well, today, when you're trying to raise $20 million, going to 4 people makes no sense. So somebody very cleverly created something called a developmental partnership. And it's an LLC, a limited liability company, that is not limited. You can raise as much money as you want, as little, like $5,000 from a person. But the idea is to use this company to develop the show. And to me, develop is everything from acquiring the rights. I invented something called the retreat. Instead of having workshop or showcase, you get in a room with the writers, a piano player, the director, and you. And you don't leave the room until at least the 5 of you are on the same page. Imagine trying to do that with a creative team of 11 or 12 people. That's not happening. So we would have a lot of retreats, writing, and then you'd start hiring your lighting designer, your sound designer. I mean, actually, you would start with your orchestrator and your music arranger. You had your composer, and then you start adding. And as you added your creative team, when you had some density, I would do another retreat. And once we did that, the full creative team, That's got to cost well over $1 million these days just to do that. And to do that, you can't, front money is. Two, the number of people you have to talk to, Richard, these days has exploded. There's no Broadway angel. Do you remember that term, the Broadway angel?
That's a word I haven't heard in a long time.
Right. There were people that were very wealthy. They loved to support the theater, and you could get almost any show off the ground by going to a few of these Broadway angels who would get on board and support. Mm-hmm. Now, really, it's about building momentum, branding your name, your message. First people you meet with is your ad agency, and you start saying, what's my message? What's my look? What am I saying? What's my press agent? Can you get to the New York Times? What are they saying? And you create a bubble around the show to distinguish yourself from how many shows open on Broadway a year? 30 to 40. Mm-hmm. And you're one of them. And you don't know if you're opening this season, next season. You have to get a theater, and there's a line now to get a theater. I think development is the process of building a reputation for your show in a really professional way. I use a line with my students where I say, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression.
That's right.
And I said,
a great story the other day where this guy was going to meet this woman that he was going on a date with for the first time. Yeah. He's on his way to meet her, and he literally bumps into this man. They knock each other off, rather than, saying, you stupid fool, look where you're going. I'm so sorry. How are you doing? Did I hurt you? He gets to the house, and it turns out that the guy that he ran into was the father of the girl that he was going to meet.
Well, that certainly drives that point home.
Yes.
Well,
John Crawford once said, be nice to everybody you come in contact with, because the person sweeping the floors today is running the studio tomorrow. And then a friend of mine said, and the person running the studio today is sweeping floors tomorrow. Yep. So just treat everybody with kindness.
Yeah. Look, I can't say I've swept floors, but I've come close to sweeping floors before I got into this business. But, the idea of making first impressions, if you make a bad first one, and in our business, a bad first impression is moving your project too quickly to public consumption. And when the public is allowed to consume and it doesn't go well between the bloggers and everybody else, it could really end pretty quickly.
Well, I want to ask you, with each of these groups that you put together, do you handpick how these groups are going to form, or do they do it on their own? How is that done?
You mean the students
in the classes?
I guess I say I trust Providence. I don't know who they are. I get their bios. The first assignment I give them is to give me a 2-page individual background paper. I said, you've read my bio. You know who I am. Tell me who you are. Mm-hmm. And I said, and good writing and grammar really matter. First impressions matter. So they all send me their bios, and it's great. I get to meet who these students are. And they're from all kinds of cross sections. NYU, one of the beauties of NYU is it attracts foreign students, and there are so many of them, and they are just bright, wonderful, hardworking kids all the time. And I said, if we're ever going to evolve as a nation, allowing different points of view to be shared voluntarily would be great, but voluntarily rarely happens in our country. We have to make people get together. So what I do is this ridiculous system. I take everybody's name, put it on a piece of paper, put it in a bag, shake it up. I pick a name, write it down, team one, second person, and I fill 10 teams by random. And I said, somewhere between me and Providence, this team was put together, and I'll take advantage of it. And you know what? It's for 13 years, it's worked. The things that these kids can do. I have a student.
Do they come up with the idea for the show that they're going to be producing, or is that something that you give them an idea to go with?
One of our classes is that your team gets to stand up in front of the team and say, we want to produce this show. and I do a little bit of a, I don't give them a hard time. And I say, oh my God, another revival of that? Why would you
Well, you just answered my next question. I was going to ask you, most of them come up with original ideas, or are you finding that a lot of times they want to revive classic theater?
A little bit of both. And in fact, in this class this year, the team chose to, this is really amazing. They chose to produce a play written by one of the 5 kids on the team. And they just did their presentation last Monday. And they have a rubric, and the most you can score is a 5. So I measure for 4 things, and a 20 is the highest score you could get. And 50 kids are rating this play being written by this student. The kids did such an they scored a 19 average out of 20.
Wow.
Yes. Right? Now, all of them, they want to produce a musical that's been done before. I said, I don't want to see a revival of that. And they said, no, we have a whole new idea. And they come up with a whole new, one of them was Titanic. And I said, well, Titanic was, stunning, a stunning musical. I said, it was just unfortunate that it never really but it was iconic. They said, well, we want to tell it from a different point of view. I said, what's that point of view? They said, well, the 2 people that everybody knows are sort of in the background, but on that very same ship, there was a gay couple sailing, and they, in those days, they couldn't come out. And I said, wow, okay, now I'm interested. Now tell me how you're going to tell that story, and why is that interesting, and how will that resonate? So yeah, it's yeah.
And at the end of the course, and maybe you have the answer, maybe you don't. What are the averages or the percentages of those students who come through your course excited about pursuing a career down this path, or decide this is not what we thought it was going to be? Maybe this is not for us.
I would say the place we score the best is, I would say 100% will in the future attend 3 to 4 to 5 shows a year, because they are absolutely blown away by the intricacy, the complicated development. I said, even getting a bad show on stage is a tremendous amount of work. And I said, and the difference between a bad show and a great show is about this much space of real intelligent collaboration. And you could make the difference. And they get all excited. I would say 1/3 of the kids who enroll in the class are absolute theater nutcases. They really want to be in the theater. I'd say about 1/3 are they're either actors or music majors or vocal majors at NYU. And I don't know if they're interested in going. And I would say the other 1/3 are film majors, entertainment majors, that now look at theater as like, wow, maybe film is great, television's great, but theater could be really interesting. This is also a time, where theater has become such a global, everyone in the world seems to know about Broadway. The brand has just grown explosively. And my worry is it's still a small business. I don't know if it can withstand the weight of an entire world's expectations of what Broadway can do. The pressure of, you have to sell 60-70% of your house, not at super discounted prices, to stay alive in the theater business.
Well, that brings me to my next question as we begin to wrap up. And thank you so much again for being here today. But obviously you don't have the answer that I'm about to ask you. But how do you anticipate, or how do you see theater coming back? It's just been announced that theaters will start to open in September. We don't know what's ahead for us as far as the pandemic is concerned. God willing, it will stay far away from us. But how do you anticipate the theater coming back?
I know what I wish. And if I can equate it to, restaurants, every time we're told that we can go out and eat. There's huge lines waiting to get into the restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
And I am just praying that when we can finally go back to opening our houses to what it is that we do, magic for people, that same amount of desire and energy will come out. My basic feeling is that if we just get everyone vaccinated, I'm not going to get on a soapbox and say it's important, but boy, maybe I should.
I'll get on that soapbox for you. It's important.
Vaccinated. It's really important. Why? Because it's the one time where you can seat people. You know what it's like in theater. You want magic for 2.5 hours. You are going to sit in a seat where your knees might be touching the seat in front of you, and you'll be sharing an elbow with two other, your armrest with two other people. That's kind of how it goes. But that's part of the magic of going out to the theater.
Absolutely.
I am hoping that pent up desire to get the heck out of our houses, heck out of our property, and just get back into the magic of Manhattan, those crowded streets and the restaurants and getting to the theater. I'm just praying. I think September, I'm a little worried about September.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little worried that might be too soon before we get, I think I'm hearing statistics that 1/3 of our country doesn't want to get vaccinated.
Right. That's where we are right now, unfortunately.
That's just crazy. Yeah. I don't look. I don't know what to do.
And she's been fed a bill of goods that would blow your socks off.
Yeah.
And she just doesn't want to get vaccinated.
It's not without some. I mean, I'm vaccinated. I didn't feel too well. Every once in a while, I feel a little funny. And I said, I'm not feeling too well. But I'm thinking, so what? There are those that are just fear it. Okay, I understand it. But we've got everybody else is fine. We're fine. My arm didn't fall off. My leg didn't fall off because I got vaccinated. Try it. Take a risk if you want to be a part of life as we know it.
Mm-hmm.
And
I will tell you, I live in Rockland County. I have not been in Manhattan since March 10th of last year. Last night, I went to a local restaurant outdoors with a neighbor. It felt so good to do that again. And we've all been vaccinated.
Yeah.
The waitress wore a mask the whole time. I want to ask you before we run out of time, how many projects are on hold for you right now?
Well, I do very little now that I'm, the COO at the Apollo. But I'm still the producer of Stomp with my partners, and we are now planning. We filed for the SVOG, but we are planning to reopen. Mm-hmm. Of course, we have a company in New York and touring. I'm involved with 2 companies in Japan that I've been consulting with for some time. And I won't mention the name of a show, but I also put a Broadway show on one of the cruise ships, and cruise ships have all been closed, for 2 years. Mm-hmm. At the Apollo, all of our programming that would have been live programming is on hold, but we've done, we have an education department that serves close to 20,000 students in New York City. We've been doing all of this virtually this entire time over the 14 months. Our full programming, like Apollo Amateur Night at the Apollo, will likely begin in January, when we feel by January we won't have issues of limitations on capacity. We think until January there may be, we open up too quickly and they shut you down. What do you do with the programming that you've already been planning? So we're being pretty conservative.
How are you able to plan during this time frame? I'm sure it's not an easy task.
We plan, we've got some amazing people on our staff, and everybody, what I did was set with our exec team, we set our parameters, beginning in January. We're actually onboarding the 2 Victoria theaters, which are 199 and 99 seats, right next door to the Apollo. We're becoming kind of a performing arts center with a bit of a campus.
That's great.
Yeah, it is great. It's very much, I'm so proud to be there. All of that is now being programmed. We're hiring artists. We're going through the budgeting and all those process. Everything will be open for rentals. We're also a performing arts center, which means we rent out, and we have some significant interest in the fall from a lot of celebrity type music people. to be coming into the Apollo. As long as the governor and the mayor say it's safe, we're ready. All of our protocols are in place. Our staff has been trained. Everyone in the venue, I'm requiring to be vaccinated. Everyone working forward-facing, public-facing is being asked to be vaccinated. So we're.
And this morning I was watching CBS Sunday Morning, and they were doing. They did a story on people going back into the workforce. Will some of your staff have the option of working from home if they feel more comfortable doing so?
We've actually come up with a plan, a work from home policy, because what we discovered, we're pretty good at working from home. You can't do live entertainment from home.
Right.
At some point, you've got to go there. But all of the work behind the scenes, a lot of it can be done without being in the office. So we're now beginning after Labor Day, we're instituting our work from home policy. And I would say on average, 2 to 3 days a week will be the number of days that people will be in the office. Some weeks you might be there 4 or 5 days, other weeks you might be less. But we have multiple departments, and all of this is being coordinated, between departments. So we always have the right density in the office to make sure we're not, leaving something out or making something delay. But I think, look, work from home, we're here. It's not going away ever.
Mm-hmm.
And it has its benefits. I'm putting in 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm sitting at my laptop, and 7 o'clock at night, I get up, and I haven't left.
That sounds like one of my days. Well, anyway, I want to be respectful of your time and respect everyone's time, of everyone that was here today. We are at the end of our show. Right. I thank you so much. I hope it was a great experience for you, as much as it was for me. I want to thank you for being here, everyone. And if you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe to Richard Skipper Celebrates on YouTube if you haven't done so already. Hit the like button for this interview if you do like it, and leave a comment, because that helps to let other people know about this. And it also helps with the analytics. And as Aldo and I both know, it's all about building that audience. Right. I want to let everyone know, if you are around tomorrow afternoon at 5 o'clock, I will be sitting down and celebrating Jack Neary, who not only is a great actor, but he's a great playwright. And actually, one of his shows was on the boards at 59 East 59th Street when everything shut down. Hopefully it will return. So we will be talking about how the pandemic has affected his last year as well. I always end every show by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Go to your Facebook friends list, and the second name that pops up, pick up the phone and call that person. Not an email, not a text message, not a private message. Pick up the phone and call them. You never know what someone else is going through right now. As our dear friend David Friedman says, we're all in this together, but we're not in the same boat. And another friend of mine says, but if you're going to be in the boat, make sure you have a skipper join you. So think about that. So Aldo, I'm going to leave the stage. I'm going to give you the screen to yourself, and I'm going to give you the final word. Anything that you want to talk about that we talked about today that you want to expound upon, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or just any message that you want to put out to everyone watching right now. I thank you for the gifts that you've given to the world and that you will continue to give. And anytime you have something to promote, I hope you'll keep me in mind and come right back.
Great.
Thank you.
Richard. What can I say? I would say staying at it, no matter what. I think process and rebirth and renewal are things that you need to be thinking about on a regular basis. There is no life that goes in a straight line, and that zigzag line often goes backwards. And I think if I've had any success in life, I think it's been because I continue to believe that I have a mission to complete, and I haven't completed it. And I suggest that you find that fuel in you, whatever it is. Don't give up ever. Just keep at it until you feel you have achieved what you set out to do. And whatever that is, I wish you the absolute best. And thank you, Richard, for allowing me to be part of your program. Take care. Bye, everyone.